Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, episode 268, as we go back 25 years to talk about Iron Maiden's Brave New World. This on the heels of our discussion of Killers 20 years before that, going back to 1980. A twofer, if you will, of Iron Maiden, discussing two very, very different times and eras for the band. But before we do a deep dive into the modern era of Iron Maiden, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. I wanted to make mention of the fact that after we recorded the episode about the self-titled Iron Maiden album, later that night I was out getting ice cream with my girlfriend and her mom, and sure enough, I saw a young woman wearing an Iron Maiden shirt, and it was the the artwork from the debut album. It was so just so weird. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what were the chances of that? I mean, the fact that she was wearing an Iron Maiden shirt at all the day that we recorded an episode is wild, but for it to be that artwork was just crazy.
Did you invite her or welcome her back to the Metal Exchange? That's what I want to know.
No, because she looked like she was young enough to only be wearing an Iron Maiden shirt as a fashion statement, and that's. I mean, I could be very wrong, but I didn't feel that it was appropriate to speak to a woman half my age at an ice cream
in front of your girlfriend and her mom, no less.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll just hope that she finds the right of the podcast through natural means, I guess.
There you go. I like it. Hopefully she runs home and is Googling Iron Maiden in her podcast machine, and she can listen to all the old episodes as well as this one if she looks once this one drops. I've got a couple of albums I just wanted to mention that have been kind of in rotation for me, one of which was a huge surprise, one of which was not much of a surprise, and one of which was a complete surprise because they're a brand new band. So I'll start with the new band, a progressive metal / prog rock band out of Finland released an album. The band is called Marsh T. The album is called Disturbances in Movements. And what's kind of fascinating about this, I think more than anything, is that some of the guys in this band play in some heavier bands, including Jaska Radikainen, the drummer of Children of Bodom. But here he is doing this prog rock, prog metal thing. Shades of Dream Theater in spots. Just an interesting listen. I'll post one of their tracks this week. If you're looking for new music on the prog front, definitely could do worse than that album. And then a band that I am not surprised. I was looking forward to checking this out, but the new album by Inglorious. They're an England-based hard rock band. They've been around for about a decade or so. The frontman of this band is Nathan James, who you may know from TSO fame. He's toured with them on occasion. Just a really good hard rock band that I've gotten into over the years. Their new album is called 5 or V. More of the same from these guys. Just a solid, easy listen on the hard rock front. Shades of a little bit of Whitesnake, a little bit of Zeppelin, and that guy's got some set of pipes. So I wanted to mention that album as well. And the surprise is a band that I remember when their stuff first started coming out, which seems like decades ago at this point. But they kind of lost me quite a bit over the last bunch of releases, but the new Volbeat album is surprisingly good. The album is called God of Angels Trust, and I have to say, I didn't have any expectations going in, but after listening to the album a few times now, I was pleasantly surprised. There's some really quality material on here, and a lot of earworms, songs that I just found myself kind of singing along to later in the day, so it's always a testament to that album. I think it's something that you in particular would enjoy.
I will keep that under advisement. I just put it in the pile. I have so much to catch up on. I mean, the last time we sat down to talk was not that long ago. So it's just been pretty much all Iron Maiden for me. I've been kind of bouncing around, just listening to random tracks and stuff, just kind of rekindling my love of this band. And it's interesting to go to make such a jump, and that was the whole idea behind the series, of making a big jump across the band's discography, and we still have a ton of albums in between the self-titled debut and Brave New World that we need to talk about, but we're just gonna skip ahead because I think that this is a really good counterpoint to the debut album, because this is almost like a rechristening of the band in 2000, or maybe even just slightly prior to that. I believe Bruce had rejoined the band in '99, and they had already been touring before the album would come out, but it looked like everything was kind of falling back into place, with the band. Adrian Smith, who had left in 1990, had rejoined. So you're pretty much looking at the current lineup. I think Nico McBrain is still technically Iron Maiden's drummer, although he's not touring with them anymore. I have to presume at this point he'll continue to drum on the albums, but I think that he's done with touring. But if that's the case, this is pretty much the lineup has stayed the same since 1999 when Bruce and Adrian rejoined the band. It's interesting if you look at the band's like history. Most of the personnel changes all took place in the late 70s while the band was trying to find their footing, and honestly, the only changes that took place after the Killers album was really just the vocalists, with Blaze coming in or Bruce coming in, then Blaze coming in, then Bruce coming back.
With the exception of, I would say, Janik, kind of replacing Adrian Smith before Adrian would come back to the band. But being that he never really left, it really was just more of an addition by the time we get to this album.
Right. So it's I really consider this album to be kind of the kickoff of the I guess if you count like the two Di'Anno albums as phase one, and then the like 80s and early 90s with Bruce as phase two. I think this was like the start of what we are continuing to see as phase three of Iron Maiden. Or maybe I guess phase three would be the two Blaze albums. So this is phase four. But I mean, I feel like in general, like the music has stayed pretty, it hasn't changed drastically in the last 25 years since this album has come out. I'd argue the production has kind of decreased in recent years. I mean, this album it sounds phenomenal, I think, but, it's an interesting time. And I just remember like how much buzz there was at this time that these two iconic members of the band were rejoining and things were kind of going back to the happy days. It in a lot of ways, it's very similar to when Michael Kiske and Kai Hansen joined Helloween, and they were like, yeah, we'll just keep the guys that we have already, except for Blaze, I guess, in this case. But I mean, they kept Yannick in tow, and same with, Helloween, rather than giving, Sasha or Wyke, God forbid, the axe, they're just like, let's just bring everyone along. What the hell? So that's kind of where we're at, and still are to this day with the band. So I'm excited to talk about this album because I didn't listen to it a ton when it first came out, even though I did buy it. But this was really like my first time really, really listening to it repeatedly, and I was I all the positive things I've heard about it are completely well-founded.
So lot to kind of break down there. I'll start by saying, and I kind of alluded to this at the end of the last episode, but I would argue that the difference in the band sound between Brave New World and today is minuscule compared to, and it's 25 years, mind you, but that if you go back 20 years before this album, it sounds nothing like Killers, or sounds nothing like the debut. I mean, like those first two Iron Maiden albums and this, you might as well be listening to two different bands. Whereas the stuff that you hear today, you can hear how it's very, very much the logical extension of this album. What I've always argued, and I never realized how true it was until I did a little research for the podcast this week. But I always thought that a lot of the songs on the Virtual 11 album had some similarities to songs on this album. Not every song, but enough of them to make it noteworthy. And it turns out it's with good reason. And I'll point out one or two tracks in particular where this comes to light. But some of these songs were actually kind of formulated in the era of Blaze Bayley and the stuff they were doing on the album prior, just 2 years before. Significant because that album gets so much flack from a lot of fans because it's not Bruce, it's a little bit different with longer songs, etc. But then this album, for the most part, gets a lot of love. And I wouldn't say that it's across the board. There's a lot of people that don't care for this album or the modern era of the band. But I actually see a lot of similarities to the album before it. And although I would argue that this album is light years better than the prior album, if you put one or two of these songs on the prior album, you might be talking about that album a lot differently because there's a lot of good material on here. Similarly, I think you could take one or two of the songs from the prior album and put it on here, and you wouldn't bat an eyelash as long as Bruce was singing. So it's really interesting what was going on for the band and what all the change that would take place over the course of just 2 years.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention because I had mentioned to you earlier today that I think it's on the one of the singles from the Brave New World album. It was either The Wicker Man or Out of the Silent Planet. They have two live tracks with Bruce singing songs from one from each of the two Blaze albums, Future Real from Virtual 11 and Man on the Edge from the X Factor, which is really kind of neat. And I think those were pulled from that Ed Hunter tour that was taking place in '99 when Bruce and Adrian had rejoined the band. But I discovered those tracks much years later and thought it was cool to hear Bruce do some of those songs and it was nice to see that the band wasn't just going to abandon them just because Blaze wasn't in the band anymore. I know nowadays it's probably pretty rare to get a Blaze song played on an Iron Maiden set list, but obviously there a lot of the guys in the band were in the band writing those songs at the time, so they might still have a connection to those. And I read the same thing you did, that a handful of the tracks were actually written originally for Virtual 11, which is kind of ironic because when, like you said, people all praise this album and not so much the other one. And things could have been very different depending on when some of those songs were released. And I guess I can kind of hear it would be impossible that within those 2 years with most of the band intact that the band would take on a completely different sound on this album.
I agreed, but it's and the reason I bring it up is because I can actually in my head hear Blaze singing some of these tracks and it wouldn't seem out of place at all. It's just a really interesting time. And it's, you mentioned them playing some of the Blaze tracks now. The reality is they do, from time to time. The Klansman has been in the set list. I've seen that happen. I've seen I want to say Man on the Edge or something off the X Factor that I saw live, but here and there they do break it out. And the Klansman live is just a really, really good tune. So it's, when they want to go back into the archives, they do, so to speak. But obviously they do concentrate on the crowd favorites, and they've been doing that for a long time. Not that they're a nostalgia act by any means. Certainly this tour, they're going real deep into some of that stuff from the early '80s. But all in all, really interesting time for the band. I guess it would have been, one way to approach it would have been just scrap everything they've done and then just write new songs for Bruce when they got back together. But then I guess they thought they had something with some of those tracks because a couple of them are some of the best tracks on the album. And I'll just kind of put it out there up front because there's a very good chance I forget to do it later. But the reality is, if you listen to, let me find this. Where is it? It'll come to me. But there was, like I said, there were certain tracks that had come straight from those earlier recording sessions when they were doing Virtual 11.
Yeah, according to an interview with Adrian Smith, the Nomad, Dream of Mirrors, and the Mercenary were all written for Virtual 11, and Blaze has claimed to have provided some of the lyrics for Dream of Mirrors, though he was not credited. So I'm wondering if the band reached out to Dave Mustaine and asked him what his advice would be on crediting people for songs.
And they Steve Harris also, like Metallica did.
Right. And Steve Harris also mentioned that work had begun on Blood Brothers during that time, though it was not completed. So, I mean, almost half the album was really like in the works before Bruce and Adrian would even, rejoin the band. So, things were in motion, but I think that what the people wanted was for those two longtime members of the band, Bruce in particular, being the voice of the band for so many years, they just wanted to see that lineup again. And I think that elevated, people's, feelings about this album. I think that the timing of all of it and the happiness of the reunion, I think kind of, gave it a little bit of a boost. Maybe it made an album that might have been an 8, a 9 for certain people, So I think that has a lot to do with things as well. It's probably my favorite of really all the albums since this one.
I would totally agree with that, and I'm not sure it's very close. I think Dance of Death has a number of fantastic tracks, but top to bottom, this album is just a very complete album. To put things in perspective, in 1998 with Blaze, they played the Roseland Ballroom, where we saw Dream Theater back in 1998. But July 7th, 1998, Iron Maiden was playing the Roseland Ballroom. The second Bruce rejoins the band, they're back at Madison Square Garden. So you're talking about a venue that's about 8 times the size. I mean, like that. It's stark how much of an impact that had, where the band was selling out arenas. Then they go into, very big clubs, 2,500, 3,000 people, and then Bruce joins the band, and they haven't left arenas since. So, quite the positive effect on their bottom line, to say the least. And
got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you the man who produced this album, Kevin Shirley, produced an album that we've discussed a long time ago on this podcast? Do you remember which album that was?
Falling into Infinity.
That's right. Which was our 3rd episode or something. It was
something like that. It's been
very early.
Yeah, it's amazing, but not that you can necessarily hear the influence. But I will say, and you said this earlier, I think that they sounded so much better on this album than they did on Senjutsu, and that was my biggest complaint with that album. I didn't think the songs were bad. I just thought the production was terrible for a band that's had very good production for virtually their entire career. I mean, we were commenting that the albums from 45 years ago sounded pretty good considering, but the album from 2 years ago was terrible. So who knows,
I'll take like a raw garage sound over a polished, muddy, mix. And that's kind of how I felt about Senjutsu. And I feel like even like recent Iron Maiden albums too, there's like this weird muddiness to it that I just don't understand when you have like this you have all the money that you could possibly want. It's obviously a decision that was, artistically made. So, I mean, I can't explain it, but this album I think sounds really great. I don't know. I can't say that I know the 2 Blaze albums well enough to remember like how good the production was at the time, so maybe you could speak to that if you think there's a big jump from Virtual 11 to Brave New World, or if it's kind of on par.
I think this sounded better. It had a little more punch to it, but I don't think that the other 2 albums were offensive. I just think that this was one of the better sounding albums, and I think Dance of Death, which followed it, also sounded pretty good. Although a lot of people would disagree, because I know that they remastered that at one point. So obviously the band thought it needed a little bit of a touch up, but I had no issue with it. I just want to ask you before we start, you said that you had gotten the album, I guess, at or around the time that it came out. What prompted you to do it? Was it that you enjoyed the best of so much that you're like, I'll get the new album? Or like, what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, well, it was easy just because like I was always so overwhelmed by the back catalog and I had no idea where to start. And so this new album comes out. I'm pretty sure I bought it when we went to the Virgin Megastore in Orlando, which for some reason that story keeps popping back up on this podcast. But I think that was one of the CDs that I bought at the time because at that point it would have been out for a couple of months. I think that's where I got it. I could be wrong, but it was the timing is right. But I guess it just seemed like it was an easier choice than to try to pick one of the first whatever 10 or 11 or like the 11 albums before. And so I just remember buying it. I didn't listen to it much at first, and then for whatever reason when I was in college, I think it was because of the Wicker Man music video, I got really into that song. And I think like I would randomly pop the album on over the years, and I always enjoyed it, but like I never really got into it because I think I needed to really like listen to it a bunch of times like I did this past week. My question to you, as we're continuing to kind of talk about the history of the band, do you think, and obviously we weren't like fans of the band at the time this was going on, but do you think that the band was losing steam with, Fear of the Dark in 1992, and that there was a reason why these, personnel changes would take place, particularly with Bruce leaving? Like, because you mentioned like the smaller venues during the Blaze era, like was the band projecting in that direction anyway, do you think? Because I know that Fear of the Dark is not a particularly well as appreciated as, the 80s releases like Seventh Son and Somewhere in Time and Power Slave and Peace of Mind. I don't remember hearing a ton about No Prayer for the Dying either. So those two albums, like those were the two early 90s albums that they did with Bruce. Like, do you get the sense that the band was kind of maybe not on a sharp decline, but they were kind of simmering at this point?
1,000%. After in 1988, when Seventh Son comes out, they're on top of the world, huge, just another great album from them. Some people would argue it's their best album. I'm not sure I would subscribe to that, but top to bottom, a very, very good album. Again, 2 years later, No Prayer comes out, and it's a bit of a miss. I've never I know people that love the album. Pat loves No Prayer for the Dying as an example, but I have never gotten into this album. There's a couple of decent songs, but I think it's wildly overrated, and I actually want to do a deep dive into it because I just never went back to it after not particularly loving it. And then Fear of the Dark obviously has one of their most classic songs on it, but the rest of the album is not as good. So I would argue that from 1990 until 1998, the band had been on a steady decline over those four albums. And so when they came out with this, with Bruce back in the band, there was a buzz about this album when it came out. I vividly remember going to pick it up from Music Arcade in Westbury. When this album came out, I remember buying the CD, and with the CD, they hand me a VHS cassette, like a big VHS cassette, and it was the Wicker Man music video. And that was all that was on the tape. I didn't know what they were handing me, but it said The Wicker Man on it. I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I still have the Wicker Man VHS that I can't even watch, but it's in my attic. And I thought it was like a really cool giveaway because I think I got the album like the weekend that it came out. Like I had to have this. And I was so glad that I did because, as I said, I think it's the best album that I'll say it this way. Going back to 1990, so you got a 35-year period for the band. This is my favorite album in that 35-year period.
I would imagine that a lot of people would probably agree. I don't know the majority of the albums during that time period well enough to really say, but this is my favorite. I mean, mostly because of the last week, but I think I probably would have said that anyway. I don't honestly, to be honest, on No Prayer for the Dying, the only song I know really well is Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, and it's not one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs. And on Fear of the Dark, I really like Be Quick or Be Dead. I've always been a big fan of that song. Fear of the Dark is great, but as we mentioned on the previous episode, like, you're probably going to want to listen to the live version and not the studio version, to be, totally honest. So again, I fully expect that we're going to fill in all of these blanks. Unlike with Halloween, where we're going in order, with Iron Maiden, we are bouncing all over the place. We've taken care of the first two albums. We still need to talk about Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind. We've covered Power Slave. We need to cover Somewhere in Time. We've covered Seventh Son, and we need to cover everything after that, and we'll accomplish at least one of those albums today. So yeah, we have still a lot of work to do, but part of the reason I chose Iron Maiden as the first band for our twofer or exchange double, or that actually sounds kind of like a foreign name for a fast food burger, the exchange double. So maybe
I'll take an exchange double, extra cheese.
Yeah, double cheese, double onions. So we've tasked our Patreon people to kind of come up with a better title, because that's the best we've come up with so far. But I think the fact that we haven't talked about Iron Maiden in a while, plus there's so many albums, it seemed like a good idea to knock two out in one full swoop and try to catch up a little bit, because we were definitely way overdue to talk about this band again. So now we get double the fun, and two totally different eras and sounds and productions, and it's singers, and it's a wildly different album, wildly different time. But I think we set the table pretty nicely here. Shall we get into the meat and potatoes of this release?
Yeah, and let's do it with obviously track number one, the aforementioned The Wicker Man single, which is the best way to open up this album. There were two singles on the album. This was the first, and I don't think there's a close second. Even the song they selected for the second single, and we'll get to that later, this has the makings of a single. It sounds like a single. It feels like a single. It kicks off the album. And if there's any doubt that the band was back, I think it's removed after this track. I'm not saying it's my favorite track, but I do really enjoy it. And even now, when they play it live once in a while, I'm like, oh yeah, this song is good. It got a little played out for me for a while, but I'm back on board with this thing. That opening riff that kicks this album off is just an iconic riff. It is probably the most straightforward rocker on the album, but it's okay because it's really, designed to be a single in many ways. The verses are very anthemic, a really catchy chorus that's repetitive but very good. And the first thing I kind of noticed about it was that it was kind of the start of that modern Maiden production that we talked about earlier, Senjutsu notwithstanding. A lot of the albums that came after this kind of employed a similar production. But the song itself, especially with Bruce's vocals back on full display and that anthemic end, you can't pick a better way to start this thing off.
Yeah, it's like, 7 years in the making, getting to hear Bruce sing with the band again on a new song. The single dropped a few weeks before the album. So I guess, this probably was a song that got some radio airplay, which is very different from 98% of everything we discuss on this podcast. Who's never even smelled a radio in the U.S. unless it was like Charlie playing the tracks at CW Post at the radio station. But other than like college radio, you weren't getting like Superior and Labyrinth on U.S. radio. But this is a song that probably definitely was on your hard rock radio stations. And I remember seeing the music video on MTV late night. God forbid MTV in 2000 would play an Iron Maiden video between the hours of 7 a.m. and midnight. But I remember I used to record late night MTV in hopes to catch a cool video. And I remember I Can from Halloween or The Wicker Man from Iron Maiden being, it was almost like fishing. Like you would just pop in the tape, hit record, go to sleep, and then wake up in the morning and hope for something good that would pop up on that tape. And you'd fast forward through a lot of crap to get to where you need to be. So this was always just for years the song that I knew best from this album. I'm sure a lot of people did too. In going back to the album, it might be my least favorite song on the album now. Maybe just from the amount of times I've heard it over the years, and I just I don't dislike it at all. But it does have kind of a single, radio hit kind of quality to it, because I feel like as soon as they go on to the next track, it really comes back to like that really classic Iron Maiden sound. This, I feel like, has kind of more of a unique sound. It doesn't, to me, sound very like screaming Iron Maiden at you. It almost has kind of an originalness to it, which I think it was not the worst choice, because, the band, it's a new era. The band is back, rather than release Man on the Edge with Bruce singing, let's do something that's a little bit, different out of the box and maybe a little more radio friendly, and try to maybe hook in some new fans. Clearly it worked, because they went from Roseland Ballroom to, playing arenas again. So, I mean, still though, I think it's definitely a kind of a no-brainer as the opening track. And I just have a very fond memories of playing it at parties in college, just sneaking it into mixtapes while people are playing, or mixed CDs, I should say, playing beer pong in dank basements, and all of a sudden the track changes to The Wicker Man, and me and Knops just kind of slyly smile at each other as we're the only two people who know what the hell is going on. I would always try to sneak some metal songs into playlists and CD mixes at parties that I didn't think were gonna completely flip the party over and confuse people. And I thought this wasn't the worst song to sneak in there. So I don't remember anybody really caring. So I guess it was an okay choice. I feel like had I put on Cannibal Corpse, it might have been a different reaction, but I do have fond memories of this, during my waning metal years during college. This was a song that stuck out. I'm sure I played it on the radio show in college and stuff, but it's a cool song, and I think it's a really iconic song just for what it represents more than anything else.
Yeah, it's well said, and I think it was mentioned, but just to be clear, the album comes out May 29th of 2000, so right on the heels of the 25-year anniversary. Great opener. What are your thoughts on the second track? Because the Ghost of the Navigator, to your point, has a very different feel than The Wicker Man.
Yeah, this to me, right from the get-go, you have that really just Iron Maiden trademark guitar tone, that really quiet but obviously Iron Maiden sound, and then it kicks off, and the way that the song kind of has this mid-tempo chug to it reminds me a lot of Can I Play With Madness, but it's a better version of that to me. I think this is a much better song. The kind of the riff and that chug or whatever, very reminiscent of that song to me. But I ended up loving this song so much. It's going to be my song of the week. I just think it's just an outstanding tune. It has all the things about modern era Iron Maiden that I really like, and it really came down to today, the fifth or sixth listen to this album. It just dawned on me, just the way that it starts. It's you feel excited, it's all right, here we go. We're about to get one of those Iron Maiden songs where it's slow. It starts out slow, and it builds, and then it just, Bruce is back in full display. And I just think this is a really strong tune. So let's give it a listen, and then I will let you jump in and give some more details and your thoughts. But there were quite a few songs I felt like I could have chosen. This one kind of broke away from the pack at the end. So here's Ghost of the Navigator.
Carried forward
was Ghost of the Navigator, Chris's Song of the Week. It was also Ghost of the Navigator, Justin's Song of the Week. I love this song. It's not one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs solely. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. And I remember hearing it. I have loved this song from the moment I played this album. And as much as I thought that The Wicker Man was a good, maybe even a great way to start the album, this has all the qualities that I want from an Iron Maiden song. I love the tonality in the guitar, which was something that you mentioned earlier. I think that the song has this epic build to it where the verses kind of are melodic, they're catchy, a little bit of an edge, but it really builds to the chorus. And even the lead into the chorus is really good. But that chorus itself is absolutely outstanding. It's the best chorus on the album. And it just makes me want to jump up and down and watch this song live. I love this song. There's one or two other tracks that I could have easily had in contention, but when it came down to it, I'd be remiss not to choose it. So I'm just going to kind of piggyback off of what you said. And one other thing that I'm not even sure that I noticed until this week, but some of the drum fills on this particular song are fantastic. I just never noticed it before because I was too busy paying attention to other things. But for my money, this is an A+, 10 out of 10 song. And it's so, it deserves its place as the second song on the album. Like, it's well placed up front. But the irony is that my second favorite track is probably the title track, the next song, Brave New World. And I say that because I used to think that they were very similar tracks in a certain way, but I don't know that I feel that way anymore. It's another song with an anthemic feel, but it really starts off a lot more subdued with the guitars and the vocal lines, and you almost think it's going to be a ballad. And all of a sudden it picks up around that 1:30 mark where it gets really heavy. And if you're listening to it for the first time, you're almost saying to yourself, like, where is this thing going? And obviously, having listened to it countless times at this point, I know what we're in for. But again, it's that payoff again with that big chorus, repetitive, but really melodic, a song they go back to live to this day. I just love how even with the second verse, it gets really heavy and much faster. Just a well-constructed tune. So back to back, 3 great songs, but 2 of my favorites back to back.
This was another one of my favorites as well. It just goes to show you, like, you know, 2 of my favorite Iron Maiden songs when I first became a fan of the band were Aces High and Wasted Years. And those are 2 songs that are just like fast-paced bangers. But man, Iron Maiden writes just one hell of a mid-tempo heavy metal song. And these 2 tracks, I think, are perfect examples of that. The chorus to Brave New World, while it's a little bit repetitive, it's just so memorable. It's just so good. Like this is just another really good song. And these 2, honestly, I at first thought that the beginning of the song was like a reprise from Ghost of the Navigator. The 2 songs flow together so well that I wasn't sure that it was not the other stuff, the previous song coming back for more. But then obviously the song gets going, you realize it's a different tune. But man, these are two beast songs, like one after the other. I really like these 2 a lot, just like you.
I think there's one of my knocks on the album, and it's not like a tremendous knock, but it is a little top heavy, just because as much as I like the songs in the back, those first 3 songs, and I'll even say Blood Brothers, so I'll make it 4 for 4 with the next track. They're so good, those first 4 tracks, and the way they flow into each other, like you said, that anything is going to feel a little bit less than that unless the album was a perfect album, and it's not. So I just think it's worth noting that. But you get to a song like Blood Brothers, really cool bass line. They actually add in some symphonic elements, which I thought was something I had never really heard them do much before. I would argue that when you look at these 4 tracks back to back, it's one of the best starts to an Iron Maiden album in the discography. It's like those songs are so good. What I always thought was that Blood Brothers had a bit of a Klansman vibe to it. It's almost like the second coming of the Klansman from the album before it. But this one, just a very tight tune, another anthemic chorus, although not my favorite, but very good. And and the bridge is really low key. I love the bass and the guitar sound, and then that lead into the big finish. Just a very emotional guitar solo and a very metal tune, like something that when you hear it's just like you can't but help but say like metal, that kind of a thing. Really good start to the album with those first 4 songs.
I feel like the orchestrations are almost like they took a page out of Blind Guardian's book, and they were like, "What would an Iron Maiden song done in the style of Blind Guardian sound like?" And in a lot of ways, this song kind of accomplishes that. And again, it's like it's a third song in a row that has kind of a mid-tempo pace to it, but it just works. It's like, I always harp on this, but like to make, a ballad is a ballad and a fast-paced rocker is a fast-paced rocker, but to make a mid-tempo song really memorable and interesting, I think takes a lot of skill. And I mean, they just hit the ball out of the park 3 times in a row with these last 3 songs. This was another one that I liked a lot. And I was surprised to read that, like, the band hasn't really played songs from this album that much since it's been released. As a matter of fact, the very next tour with Dance of Death, they didn't play anything from Brave New World, which is kind of weird, I guess, when you have such an immense back catalog and people are clamoring for the old stuff. You kind of have to get your like current tour, your current album tracks out. And a lot of times, like, that recent album kind of is the one that gets like left by the wayside. But even in future tours, none of the tracks were played during the Matter of Life and Death tour. Wicker Man, Ghost of the Navigator, Blood Brothers, and Brave New World would come back during the Final Frontier World Tour, which I'm sure people were psyched, 10 years later to get to hear these songs again. And then Blood Brothers came back during Book of Souls World Tour. Wicker Man came back for Legacy of the Beast World Tour. But considering this is one of the like most well-received Iron Maiden albums in the last 25 years, you'd think they might play more songs from it. And now it's really become another one of those classic Iron Maiden albums. It's not like, sadly, it's not like, Brave New World is a fairly new album. It's really not. I mean, if you think about it, Brave New World is closer to Iron Maiden not existing before they started than it is to now.
Right. But I think the part of the problem is, they don't play 4-hour shows, so it's not like you're getting Rush out there. That's one option. The reality is, because their set lists are their set lists are static. You know what you're getting for the tour. Once they construct the set list, that's it for 2 years, 3 years, and then you don't get another set list and just a gluttony of material to choose from. But fantastic start to the album. And
it should also be mentioned that Blood Brothers has been dedicated to different people and groups over the years, depending on what was going on. It was originally written by Steve Harris for his father, who had passed away, but they dedicated it to Ronnie James Dio in 2010. They dedicated to victims and friends and family of the band members and audience who were affected by the Christchurch earthquake. So like it's become kind of like an anthem for dedicating the song to people that are having a hard time or whatever. So that's been something that they've done over the years. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there too. There's something about this song that to me really, I feel like, would resonate as a live track. I'm not sure if I've ever heard it live personally, but
it's very good. It's as good as you'd expect, to say the least. As we get to track 5 here, this is now where if it's not going to be a perfect album, this is where the album takes a little bit of a dip for me, and that's The Mercenary, Janet Gear's track. Not my favorite song. It's not that it's bad. It's just a little bit less than what's come before it. It's more upbeat in terms of its presentation, more akin to The Wicker Man than the 3 songs that followed. A decent chorus, but somewhat unremarkable. And I just find it a little repetitive, not the most interesting track. But at that said, the vocals, especially during the verses, really good. And some wild guitar solos that feel modern, but at the same time feel entirely Iron Maiden all the same. So it's like hit or miss on this track. It's just not as good as the stuff that had come before it.
Does this song sound to you like Blaze Bayley could have sung it and nobody would have thought twice about it?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
and
because
that's what
that's kind of the vibe. That's the vibe I got, especially in the chorus. Bruce almost sounds like Blaze at times, oddly enough, when he sings in that lower register. I think this is a solid song. I think I think it brings up the pace slightly from the last three songs. I think it's still kind of a mid-tempo song, but I think it has a little more energy to it.
Yeah, and this was one of the tracks that was written during the Blaze era. So when I say that this song sounds like Blaze, or when you say that, it's because they wrote it with Blaze in mind. I mean, call it for what it is, and then you just have Bruce kind of singing it, and maybe that's why it's a little bit less than. Like, it just didn't seem. It seemed a little bit almost like a little bit like a B-side for Virtual 11. So I don't know. Again, not bad. It's not like it's skippable. It's just there's better stuff before it and better stuff to come, not least of which is Dream of Mirrors, track number 6. This is another track that I think could have easily been a song of the week for me. It's a little bit quirky, a little bit offbeat, kind of proggy, kind of different, and longer, like just longer in the sense that this is a song that's 9 minutes and 21 seconds. It's the longest song on the album, and the band would go on to do a lot of songs in that 10-minute range. But this was not something they did all the time, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner and some others notwithstanding, but this one has a bit of a Middle Eastern flair to it. And I forgot how good this song was. You go from these like airy, slower verses to these like heavier, slightly more upbeat choruses. And then the ending of this song is just so good, where it kind of just speeds up, at the bitter end. Really heavy. Love the sped up chorus at the very end, like the last chorus or two. I love this track. And I know that we had somebody in our Patreon group chat, Chris Calabrese, who said this was his song of the week, I believe, for what the album is. I can totally see why. It's a great, great tune.
This was one of my considerations for song of the week also. It's interesting because Yannick and Steve Harris both co-wrote this song and the previous track, and the two songs are so different from one another. It's really interesting. But yeah, this one's just really good. And something that I'm like just jogging my memory that I remember about when I bought this album. I thought it was crazy that 7 out of the 10 songs were 6 minutes or longer. Because
it's a meaty album. It's a 67 minute album. It is not short.
All the heavy hitter Iron Maiden. Right, I agree with that. All the heavy hitting Iron Maiden songs that I knew up to this point were not typically that long. So it was a little bit surprising to me. I feel like at this point I've reached a point where like lengths of songs don't really matter to me anymore as long as the song is good. So like length of songs and length of albums, as long as I'm in, it keeps my interest. I don't really care. And this is just one of those tracks that at, over 9 minutes, it's a really good song all the way through. That long. Yeah. And I also think it's kind of cool just at the very end when Bruce sings the song a little bit faster, like the tempo just kind of kicks up, and it's kind of makes for kind of a cool way to wrap things up. But this is another really epic, mid-tempo song. Like, epic is like the word of the day on a lot of these tracks, but this is another really strong tune, and I can understand why someone would choose it as their favorite track on the album.
So I guess as we roll along here, they compare and contrast Dream of Mirrors with the shortest track on the album, and that's The Fallen Angel, penned by Adrian Smith and Steve Harris. What's your thought on this? It's a 4-minute song, very tight. Almost forgot about this one. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Reminds me of a really early Ed Guy song in a lot of ways. But it's a solid tune. Like I feel like it's interesting because like the songs that have a little bit more like oomph to them are kind of, I think, not as good as the mid-tempo epic songs like The Mercenary and The Fallen Angel, but I think I like this one a bit more than The Mercenary, and I like both tracks better than Wicker Man, in all honesty. And Wicker Man, again, might just be a victim of being the most overplayed song by far for me on this album. But I like this tune quite a bit. I think that just is a really good, has just a nice gait to it, and it's just I really like the chorus. I just think it's a solid tune, but like the beginning of the tune for whatever reason was like giving me Ed Guy vibes, almost to the point where like Bruce's vocals sounded like Tobias at times. So I thought it was kind of neat. I mean, obviously, the early Ed Guy stuff came out before this, which is crazy. So who knows? Maybe Bruce was listening to Vainglory Opera before he rejoined Iron Maiden.
That's funny. I agree with you. I like it better than the Mercenary. I thought that the use of like the layered vocals was kind of cool. That's not something they do all the time. They do it on this track. As far as I'm concerned, the best part about this track is the guitar work, including the solos. I just don't find it quite as memorable as some of those epic tunes, as you mentioned. Surprisingly heavy tune, a good song, just not an A+ song. And then you go back to it. It's kind of sandwiched in between another epic with the Nomad. This is another song that has like that Middle Eastern vibe to it, especially in the guitar riffs. I've never been a huge fan of this song, believe it or not, and I think that it's not bad, and there's elements of it that I really enjoy, but when you put it together, it's just kind of oddly constructed, I guess. Definitely one of Bruce's best vocal performances on the disc, although the song itself had that Blaze era sound, so it was not surprising to me when I found out that this was another one of those early or late era Blaze tracks. It's a little long in the tooth for me. I think they have better epics, so it's almost a victim of being on an album with better songs in the same genre of the same ilk, but it's not bad. I enjoy it. It's just not my favorite.
Yeah, this was the song that I think I changed my tune on the most from like the beginning of the week to the end of the week. Like I thought this was kind of a blah tune at first. Maybe not terribly different than my thoughts about like, Pharaoh on Divine Wings, or, that one song that kind of makes a great album a little less than, but it actually grew on me quite a bit the more that I listened to it. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album, but it's certainly not out of place by any sense. And if you're into like that Middle Eastern kind of vibe, I think you'll probably enjoy the song even more. But it is the second longest tune on the album, and if you're not a fan of it, it takes a while to get through. So I'm okay with it, and I think that it's well placed before the final two tracks. But I don't have a big issue with this or really any of the other songs on the album. I think all the songs are at least good. There's nothing below good to me.
And I think it's well placed because the last two tracks are really good, so you kind of end on a high note. And you kind of bury a track like The Nomad, which may not be their best song. Out of the Silent Planet, the second single is the next track. And this is a real banger of a tune. I love that opening riff. It's got some synthesizers on here. It almost gives it a Somewhere in Time vibe, which I wasn't expecting, but I really enjoyed. The first verse is very melodic, catchy, kind of low key, but then it really starts to pick up. The chorus is also catchy, just slower than I remembered. I remember this being a much more upbeat tune, and it just felt a little slow. Not bad, just slower than I remembered it in my mind. The pre-chorus feels a little bit like the title track, and then the chorus itself is very separate and distinct. And the last minute of this song is really, really good, even though I would argue that the chorus and some of the sections are kind of repetitive, but I happen to enjoy this a lot.
I remember circling back to this track when it came out as a single, and I was like, because I remember I hadn't listened to the album a ton after I had purchased it, and so when this came out as a single in October of that year, I went back and just listen to it and just to see what it was all about. So this was always the song I knew second most from this album. And this is one of those tracks that I think shows Iron Maiden doing their just totally different tempos and speeds throughout the song. Like you have that really deliberate intro, that guitar intro is very spacey. The fact that the track is called Out of the Silent Planet makes a lot of sense because it almost feels like has an outer space kind of vibe. And then it has kind of like, the whispering Bruce intro before the guitars kick in. But then the song, starts out as a mid-tempo song, but then picks up speed as it goes, and has a lot of really, I think, solid soloing. And by the time the song ends, it's moving fast. It's one of the end of the song is one of the faster portions of the entire album at times. But then at the very end, it goes back to that kind of mid-tempo chorus, and then circles back to that opening guitar riff to kind of put a bow on that track and bookend it in a nice way. But I'm glad it's not the last track, because I like the next track a bit more.
And the next track is the thin line between love and hate, a Murray Harris collaboration. Why do you like this last track so much?
I don't know. It just sounds good. It has like a very satisfying sound to it as like the last track. It's another kind of longish track at 8+ minutes. I don't know that there's anything that really particularly stands out other than the fact that it's just a really solid tune. Like it has a little bit more of the, I feel like, old school Bruce sound, not so much the Blaze sound of like the mid to late 90s. And I thought it was a really solid tune to choose as the album finale. So I wouldn't say that I love the song. I think it's probably in my top half on the album, or maybe just right somewhere in the middle there. But I think it's a really solid tune, and this was one that I just did not remember at all. So it was a good tune. I'm hoping you have something more substantial to say about it than me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the riffs are good. I think that the bass lines that are underneath are also pretty good. Verse is a little bit cheesy. They're fine, I guess. The chorus is really solid. I like, again, the dual layered vocals, another track that employs that. This is a very proggy tune in many ways. This is like, they're not writing Can I Play With Madness? Not that that's a bad song, but Gone is Run to the Hills, Gone is Can I Play With Madness, and now they're kind of experimenting with these longer tracks, this being one of the better ones. I think the bridge is outstanding, and there's something about the song that has like a really big time feel to it. It's a really good closing track, especially the way it fades out kind of towards the bitter end. I almost
forgot to mention, but the way that the song starts reminds me a lot of a slowed down Aces High. Like if Aces High was like a mid-tempo song, that's what the first 40 seconds of the song kind of give me that vibe. I almost forgot to mention that, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, but all in all, a good way to end the album. And when you go back and listen to it, it holds up. The biggest compliment I can give it is that when I want to go back and listen to an Iron Maiden album that's not made in the 80s, this is the one I go back to 8 out of 10 times because I love it that much. Not perfect, a little bit top heavy, but really, really good. And I don't think that there's any Iron Maiden album that's perfect, but this is close.
I think that's very, very fair. And I think discussing it now, I think also is important because now, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're not looking at it, through the rose-colored glasses of, Bruce and Adrian have just come back and like, this is it. This is the second coming of Iron Maiden and whatever. Enough time has passed where I think we can look at this album, from a more objective point of view. Even though, most of what we talk about on this podcast is subjective. I think that this is, it's interesting because I was looking at some of the reviews and most of them are really solid, but like Blabbermouth kind of panned this album. They gave it a 5 out of 10 and basically said it goes without saying that the old school metal purists will hail Brave New World as a flag waving return to form from one of the genre's most influential and enduring artists. Ultimately, however, Iron Maiden's latest CD will appeal to no one but the diehard fans of the group, and as such, it will fail to leave a lasting mark on the face of the current metal scene. I think whoever wrote that review, probably in looking back on it, was kind of off. And I don't know if they were just trying to be like
provocative or something.
Or just thinking that they were ahead of the curve and that one day people would look back on this album and it wouldn't be as big of a deal. I feel like that review didn't age well. I'm just going to come out and say I'm giving this an 8.375. For me, it falls like right in between the first two albums that we discussed, but not quite as good as the two like classic 80s Bruce albums, Power Slave and Seventh Son. So that's kind of where I think the album lands for me.
I think that despite its flaws, the highs on this album are so good that it's more than just an 8. And so I think I'm quibbling with like exactly what to give it. But for me, I'll give it an 8.5 because the fact that I keep playing it as much as I do to this day tells me everything I need to know. And again, it's not a 9. It's not in that rarefied air, but it's a much better than average album and one of my personal favorites from the band. I disagree with that blabbermouth review. But again, different strokes for different folks. Like, I mean, I like stuff that other people don't like and vice versa. So,
and to be fair, Kerrang gave it a 5 out of 5. Metal Hammer gave it a 9 out of 10. Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles gave it a 10 out of 10. So like, to each their own, I guess. And I before I forget one last thing, I will say one of my favorite parts of the entire album is when Bruce sings the thin line between love and hate, where it just gets quiet and he just belts it out. It's one of my favorite vocal performances on the whole album, and I love the solo that kind of takes the song out. So I was inspired to talk more about that last track at the end there, but yeah.
Well, this was fun. I love the contrast between last week and this week, but at the end of the day, 2 great albums by one great band.
I'm super excited to see when the time comes for you to choose 2 albums from the same band, what band it is and what albums it is. So that is exciting. I will say, I don't think we discussed so much of like the process, but I think we're going to try to make it so that we'll alternate whenever we do this. So you will be the next one to pull out an exchange double, I guess. I think I might be sticking with that, Royale with cheese, if you will.
I look forward to it. I've got a couple in mind. I don't think it'll be next week, but I do have some in mind. So something to look forward to. But as we forge ahead here, I want to just mention 2 news items, and then I will get to next week. First and foremost, the Cavalera brothers are going to perform all of Sepultura's Chaos AD album on their fall U.S. tour. Fear Factory opening that. Playing a bunch of markets, nowhere really near me. Some smaller places as well. I don't see any huge places, although they're playing Dallas in the South. But the show, or I should say the tour, starts September 18th in Louisville, Kentucky, and it goes through October 18th in Dallas, Texas. So if you're a fan of that old school Sepultura, stuff, I think you're going to really enjoy that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, I don't know, not really news, but apparently Mad with Power, the festival, the video game and power metal festival, announced that although they had a very successful, I guess, festival this past weekend, they are deep in the hole in terms of visa costs and everything else. I guess attendance was a little bit down this year, although the lineup was stellar by comparison, but kind of sad that they couldn't break even. I think they were down by like $15,000 because they had to expedite all the visas and stuff. Did you see this, or is this the first that you're hearing about it?
I just had heard that they haven't decided if they were going to come back next year, and so I kind of assumed that might have been the reason why. It sucks that this is happening, because it's like I personally don't feel like having a European band come to the US and play one hour or one 90-minute set is taking food out of anyone's mouth. So kind of it stinks for that, and I feel like if things continue in this direction, it's going to be challenging for Prague Power going forward, and and it's not like there's a ton of American metal fests that feature foreign acts. I mean, that's pretty much the reason I think Prague Power began in the first place, because it was an opening that we needed. Like, we want, the fact that like Angra and Stradivarius and Edguy and Nightwish and bands like that were not playing in this country. Prague Power was a big foot in the door for a lot of these bands, and now it feels like they're being shown the door. And I know like the bands I just mentioned probably would have a much easier time garnering a visa because of their history of playing in the US. But the issue with that is that like they're kind of priced out of playing a smaller festival. And so in order to get that new blood in, you have to be able to bring over some bands that might not have the notoriety necessary to obtain a visa. So it's a really frustrating, like, catch-22. And it just feels like over the years, it's just gotten, worse and worse. And it's a bummer. And like I know people that attend the Mad with Power Festival that have just an absolute blast attending it, and just, it's supposed to be a lot of fun. And if it doesn't continue because of, the fact that they decided to bring on some, international talent, that's a real bummer to me.
Yeah, well said. I really don't have much to add. I know that they've gone bigger with their lineups, trying to get more, more names in the fold. And this is the risk you run when either it doesn't sell as well or there's costs associated with those bands. I know when they started with primarily a North American-based festival with North American bands, it was a lot easier to get the bands in, but they may not be able to put 1,500 people in a room because maybe the bands didn't garner it or whatnot. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. I wish them well. I've never been to the festival. I've certainly got no horse in the race, but I like to hear things that are in the scene doing well. So only time will tell. And speaking of time,
and Prague Power has, 25 years of goodwill also. Yes. That, I think kind of helps soften the blow when your favorite bands end up not being able to play. And in all honesty, it's like a lot of the times, even the last minute replacements just end up being really good fits, and it just kind of works its way out. And it's kind of become like this necessary evil over the years, which really stinks. But, I don't know. I hope maybe someday it's not, quite as difficult to just be able to bring some of our friends over, from Europe and Australia and Japan and all these other great countries that have so much great music. And it's unfortunate, but like as far as like power metal and prog metal, like the US just isn't, in my opinion, the leading country when it comes to those styles of music. And while there are very good bands, you really need to have some of those European bands to kind of fill that bill up. That there's a reason that Orden Ogan is high, headlining Prague Power this year along with Symphony X, and there's a reason Sonata Arctica is headlining one of the days of Prague Power. Like there's some cachet with some of these European bands that they're just when it comes to American bands, it's a lot. It's like either they are just so big that it's just not realistic, or they're so small that it's not going to move ticket sales. So that's like right. There's very few bands that hit that magic sweet spot. So I'm just rambling at this point, but I mean that's kind of like where we're at.
No, I completely agree, and I share and echo those sentiments wholeheartedly. And like I said, I just wish them well. We'll see what happens. Hopefully things pick up, or hopefully they're able to, maybe they scale it down for a year and then try to build back for the following year. I'm not really sure what the plan is, but we'll be watching, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, the festival worked without having any international acts, like up until last year, I think was the first year that they did it. So,
and maybe they only do one or two instead of doing a whole bunch of them. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yep.
As we look ahead to next week, there's a band that we have not covered. I mean, there's thousands and tens of thousands of bands that we haven't covered, but there's one in particular that's celebrating an anniversary, and it was an album that I thought no better way to intro the band than to talk about this particular album. So the album came out June 21st of 2005. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary. The band is Redemption, and the album is The Fullness of Time, their second full-length release, the first to feature Ray Alder on vocals. This is a really good album, and I'm looking forward to talking about this. We haven't talked about prog in quite a while. I know that you're familiar, I think, with this album, if not every track, damn near all of it, and it's just long overdue. So we'll talk about some Redemption next week at the Metal Exchange.
I only have 2 words for you. Not scared.
Why do you say that?
Just because there's a song called... It made me think of... that's... It is kind of insane to think about that we've never talked about this band. So that is... that's exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. And just as a programming note, Justin will be choosing the following album as well, since I chose these 2 Iron Maiden albums. That was kind of the agreement we've come to, and we'll do the same thing when Justin chooses his exchange double. So it'll be interesting to see what you choose the week after as well. But this is a nice choice, and I look forward to listening to this. I know the song threads incredibly well. I think the rest of the album I could definitely use a tune-up with. So good stuff. It's never a bad time to listen to Ray Alder sing. I'll just say that.
Well said. I completely agree with you. So we'll get to that and all things Redemption next week. Thanks to everyone for listening. Give us a like and a follow if you like what you hear. And, of course, consider joining the Patreon. It's the best way to support the show, to say the least. So with that, I will let you do your thing. Enjoy your time away. I know you're heading out for a little bit, and we'll come back next week with some Redemption.
Yeah, let's not wait another 2 years to talk about an Iron Maiden album again. That was kind of insane that we went 2 years without doing an Iron Maiden episode. So hopefully these 2 will make up for that.
Indeed, indeed. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.